You know where the real horror started for millennial kids? When a group of documentary filmmakers set foot in the Amazon rainforest and somehow got entangled in the hunt for a giant snake. No brownie points for guessing which movie we're talking about today. This 1997 Luis Loza directed snake horror made many strike out the Amazon rainforest from their travel bucket lists. Oh, and also my hair stands on end when snakes are being discussed to this day. Yup, that's how strong and lingering the effect of Anaconda was. For those of you who escaped the trauma, here's a quick recap of the first movie. Oh, but before we get too deep into things, we do have a very quick request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to the channel. It's a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The movie, which was a joint American-Brazilian effort, followed a film crew that went into the jungle to make a documentary about the long-lost indigenous tribe in the region, Shirishama. Director Terry Flores had his team ready with cameraman Danny Rich, production manager Denise Kalberg, and her boyfriend, who was also the sound designer, Gary Dixon. They also had a narrator, Warren Westridge, a boat skipper, Mateo, and an anthropologist professor, Stephen Cale. It was a basic film crew, but wait till you hear the big shot names who were cast for the roles. Anaconda managed to secure stars like Jennifer Lopez, Eric Stoltz, Jon Voight, Owen Wilson, Ice Cube, and Jonathan Hyde for the lead roles. Coming back to the story, the group came across a snake hunter from Paraguay, Paul Cerrone, who assured them that he would lead them to the Shirishama. Most of the people were uncomfortable about Cerrone joining their trek, but in a heroic moment, he saved Cale's life. Unfortunately, Cerrone's glory didn't last for long, and soon he revealed his true intentions: to capture the great green anaconda. And bam! You found yourself in the middle of one of the best jungle thrillers of the 90s. Needless to say, the group is attacked by this terrifying snake and loses some of its members before it can overpower the giant queen anaconda, which measures up to 40 feet. The movie gives barely any respite, with tension building in every scene, beautifully choreographed action, and an ambient, specific soundtrack composed by Randy Edelman. We managed not to give out spoilers so you can watch it, because trust us, despite critics raising their eyebrows at the film, it's pure entertainment and went on to become a 90s cult classic. In fact, the box office success of Anaconda blatantly shows a finger, you know which one, to the negative responses and grossed nearly $137 million. Rotten Tomatoes still has a positive general consensus about the film, which says, Anaconda's pulpy pleasures are constricted by its own absurdity, but creature feature fans may enjoy its brazen silliness. Anaconda also earned 2 nominations at the Saturn Awards, one for Jennifer Lopez as Best Actress and the other for Best Horror or Thriller Film. Jennifer Lopez, dude. I was 11 and I already knew what the best part of this movie was. Sure, movies get roasted by critics, but becoming a crowd favorite is more rare, so what sets Anaconda apart? Well, it was the determination of the entire cast and crew who pulled off an amazing old-school horror treat with a minimal budget of $45 million and endless production hazards. Filmmaker Lewis initially delayed the shooting by a couple of months because he knew that the 1995 drought in the Amazon made the whole region non-functional in the upriver areas. When they reached the location in April, expecting natural rains to restore the water, they faced an unforeseen difficulty. The water level was now so high that the crew had to build their own dock where the beach was. That's not all. Filming on the water was a challenge in itself. The team had to carry the camera onto a boat, and everything, including support vehicles and props, had to be accessible on the water. Production basically turned into a setup of borrowed barges and emptied tourist boats being used as floating workstations. But they still had to shoot the snake's point of view. They used a boat for that too, but it was one of the most unique vessels built by cinematographer Bill Butler for the film. It was a small 2-man skiff, which was called the Anaconda among the production crew, which would enable underwater to surface filming from the Anaconda's perspective. However, the real challenge was yet to come: making the snake. Anaconda was actually the first film by CL Cinema Line Films Corporation to be brought to screen through a first-look deal with Columbia Pictures. President of production of the CL Cinema Line and Anaconda's executive producer, Susan Ruskin, found the script and brought it to producer, Berna Hara, who recalled, "What struck me about Anaconda first was the potential to scare people and have an exciting action-adventure film at the same time." With Columbia Pictures on board, the filmmakers brought the idea to Sony Pictures Imagework to create and manipulate huge, photorealistic anacondas. The film used about 30 real anacondas of all sizes, but they needed considerable aid to depict the huge reptiles believably attacking, eating, coiling, and regurgitating prey. After a series of discussions, it was decided that they needed some real talent to animate the Vipers. Visual effects supervisor for the film, John Nelson, stated that computer animations helped them realize the director's true vision, which could not be achieved with just animatronics, at least not without fatally wounding the actors. Computer graphics supervisor on the film, John McLaughlin, stated that using CG characters in close interaction with the real action characters, which had to sync both physically and visually, was a pain in the ass. He said, "We integrated the snake on a holistic level so that details, shadows, reflections, and smoke elements all work together. Still, positioning the creature in water, making it interact with real objects, and executing the detailed moves is extremely difficult." To accomplish such a high level of intricacy, Sony Imageworks even developed a special software. When Sony realized that the 1997 Anaconda worked pretty well as a dollar printing machine, they gave a rat's ass about critics' opinions and went ahead with the sequel. The result was Anaconda, The Hunt for Blood Orchids in 2004, directed by Dwight H. Little. This movie marked the downfall of the franchise. Well, before it was even a full-blown franchise, actually. The film became an apparent box office success, earning $71 million worldwide, but that's only because it seemed like a lot compared to the meager budget of $20 to $25 million. Well, for a studio that wanted to cash in on the profit-making aspect of a film, they poured less money in than the first part. No one would ever know what was happening in those boardroom meetings at Sony's head office, but whatever it wasn't the best discussion. Now, although the movie wasn't in the red, compared to its predecessor, the revenue was significantly lower. Moreover, the critical reception of this movie was mixed at best. In fact, Roger Ebert, who went somewhat lenient on the first one, had had enough and rated it lower than the first part. Sony soon realized that they had yet again walked into the infamous franchise track of Hollywood. To save the day, the studio released the next 3 Anaconda movies directly on television under their imprint, Stage 6 Films, along with Hollywood Media Bridge. However, before we delve into the TV movies, let's take a look at what the second part offered and how viewers welcomed it. The movie revolved around a group of researchers funded by a New York-based pharmaceutical company, Wexel Hall. This time, they were sent to the jungles of Borneo instead of the Amazon, and yet again faced a giant snake. For some reason, the writers chose to shift anacondas from their natural habitat to an island in Southeast Asia, so right from the beginning, you pretty much know this movie is gonna mess some stuff up. The researchers wreck the forest in search of the blood orchid, known to contain the fountain of youth. The film played out on overly familiar tropes and even threw in a man versus crocodile moment. The team was typical, for lack of a better word. Bill, the captain, is a jack-of-all-trades, master of none, while Sam Rogers never really developed a personality of his own. Also, he's the love interest of several others. Gail is openly hostile towards her younger female colleague and conveniently turns into a damsel in distress. The others are honestly not even worth talking about. I mean, they just don't leave much of a footprint on the film in terms of character development. The plotline is utterly predictable. You think there might be an anaconda around, and guess what? You're right, every time. However, kudos to the effects team. At least they didn't let us down. Another thing that remained true to the original film was the sexual tension. In Hunt for the Blood Orchid, the characters can be caught exchanging quick winks and glances. That's about it. The rest of the movie went as far from realism as possible, and you'd know that the director had given up on any hopes for inducing fear. All he wanted to do and could do was deliver witless entertainment, and on that aspect it ran. Despite the glaring issues with the film, the movie is indeed amusing. Fans of the first film were still taken aback at the change in tone for the film and how worthless the characters were. Still, the movie didn't tank. Audiences have found humor in how awful it is, and praised the movie for being a brain-rot watch. A Reddit user claimed that it's so bad that it's actually enjoyable. Alright, understandable. We all have days where we just want to turn our brains off and watch something without getting into the nuance. The Hunt for Blood Orchids hits the perfect note in such cases because there is no nuance either in the narrative or the characters. It's just unhinged fun, a guilty pleasure that we grew up with. Even when the franchise clearly showed that it was drowning, greed overtook it. The insatiable hunger to earn profits by forcefully continuing the franchise blinded the producers and the studio involved, and fans got an even worse movie with Anaconda 3: Offspring in 2008. However, this movie found no space in theaters and was released directly on cable television on July 26th. The budget was understandably constrained, and the film blemished even the CGI that was basically the only good part about the last 2 movies. We understand that the film series was being moved from big screen to television, but it deserved some leeway. But I mean, come on, there's a clear shot of a crew member walking right through the middle of a scene. Yeah, that happened. Everyone seemed to be held at gunpoint in making this movie, and what we got was an insanely bad plot and subpar acting. But hey, you'd get to see Romania at least. Since I tortured myself into watching it, here's the premise of the film. It hastily picks up from the end of Hunt for Blood Orchid, and we get to see Wexel Hall scientists running tests on the blood orchid that they managed to bag. They were experimenting to determine whether the drug could truly cure everything and used it on several species. But of course, the definite answer could only be obtained after using it on a goddamn anaconda, because of course. Nothing to worry about though, because they already have 2 huge anacondas at the genetic research facility, Wexel Hall in Romania. Throw in a jackass billionaire, Peter J.D. Murdoch, some media protests about the cruelty of animal testing, and a somewhat sane research lead in Amanda Hayes who tries to warn that the anacondas were way too big for the building, only to be proven right, and there you've got it. That's Anaconda, the offspring, ready to be served up. The captive snakes obviously break free because how could we have a movie without that? They cause a rampage and kill dozens before escaping. In a patchwork attempt to handle the situation, an animal hunter is hired to find and recapture the snakes, Amanda and Murdoch's assistant Pincus tagging along. The rest of the movie is indescribable chaos with quite a few unnecessary deaths, both from humans and snakes, grenades, explosions, Queen Anaconda giving birth amidst all of it. Amanda gave up on her research, but the tycoon obviously managed to get a baby snake delivered to him. And what did we get? 91 minutes taken off our lives from another painful sequel. Also, we'll never forgive this movie for establishing those forced connections to aliens. Just because a xenomorph's steel-sharp tail is one of its greatest strengths doesn't mean you can give an anaconda the same thing. It was redundant to even say what the opinions about this movie were. It was downright terrible. Some of the characters' storylines kept changing from one scene to the next, and to drag out the runtime, needless flashbacks of scenes that had just happened were used as filler. Writing, editing, sound design, everything was an abysmal failure. This time around, it didn't even feel like the movie was unintentionally bad. It was by all intention dreadful. Yet, they went ahead with Anaconda's Trail of Blood, released in 2009. However, before diving into that shit show, we want to talk about some of the redeeming elements of Anaconda 3 Offspring. The opening act, reviewers saw the distinctively built lab and John Rhys Davies' performance. He's not on Jon Voight's level of villainous excess, but he looked like the only one having fun in the movie. The evil capitalist persona and the smirky dialogue makes him the most tangible human presence in the movie. If you're really up to see how bad a movie can be, go watch Anaconda 3, where you'll get at least 30 minutes of watchable scenes, some of them with Gimli, till the cast hits the road. Directed by Don E. Fauntleroy, Anaconda's Trail of Blood followed the movie and was released only on television. Crystal Allen and John Rhys Davies reprised their roles as Amanda Hayes and Peter Murdoch. Once again, we got an anaconda stuck in the middle of lab tests. Yeah, it's the same baby snake captured by one of Murdoch's minions at the end of the last movie. In this part, the scientist, Peter Resner, successfully created a serum for cell regeneration which worked on the baby anaconda. However, he burns the serum and disappears, only for the baby snake to find and kill him in a mine filled with blood orchids. Yeah, that's right, even the director had no friggin' clue what was happening, but we're guessing since he got paid, he had to continue. Meanwhile, the business mogul had fallen seriously ill in this movie and sent his henchmen to find Peter, get the serum, and cure his bone cancer. Amanda too suddenly became Dora the Explorer and decided to look for Peter, get the elixir, and kill the snake. If you already think, what the hell's going on? Just wait. Amanda and her crew meet a random trekker named Alex who was lost in the Romanian Carpathians. But Alex had to fit into the movie, so they made him someone who was doing a project in paleopathology. Amanda and her group found the blood orchid mines first and explored them. Anacondas popped out of nowhere and killed 2 officers from her team. She then thought, why not play a little game with the snakes, and actually tricked one of the anacondas into getting killed. The movie then brings in even more useless characters, don't ask why. A group of explorers gets caught up hunting the snakes, which now could not be easily killed owing to the regenerative abilities. Nothing but a whole lot of confusion and melodrama fill the rest of the runtime. Murdoch manages to get a hold of the serum in the end. It should have been a happy ending, at least for him. They still had to stretch it by a couple of minutes without letting the franchise die. Murdoch is suddenly attacked by the anaconda, kicking off the action once more. In the end, he and his competitor Eugene died in an explosion triggered by Amanda. The snake regenerated and escaped into the woods. However, unlike the last film, the acting and the storytelling pace were still tolerable. In some aspects, it was kind of better than the third one, but still, the general consensus is that it's a huge load of garbage. John Rhys Davies tried really hard to work with his underwritten character, and the scenery was sort of nice, but the dull photography spoiled. Overall, it's a mess, but it's a better mess than Offspring, for whatever that's worth. You know guys, acceptance is the key to happiness. Looks like the makers of Anaconda never got the memo. So they made sure the anaconda that escaped into the woods found its way to Lake Placid. That's right, it's time for an absolutely unnecessary crossover, Anaconda vs. Lake Placid, released in 2015. It served as the sequel to Lake Placid, the final chapter, and Anaconda's Trail of Blood was the fifth installment in both franchises. Now, Lake Placid is another movie series that went downhill and was in quite a bad state when Anaconda joined. However, the genres of the films were extremely different. Lake Placid was a horror comedy from the very beginning, revolving around a man-eating crocodile and people's failed attempts to kill the beast. Anaconda never leaned towards comedy. It always sold the movies as horror or adventure thrillers, but probably this was a frantic attempt to revamp the franchise. The crossover was as crazy as it sounds. Jim Bickerman, the main antagonist in the Lake Placid franchise, joins hands with another mercenary, Beach, to capture a giant female crocodile, then two scientists crossbreed its blood with a female anaconda to perfect the blood orchid serum. Obviously, both beasts escaped and freed some other snakes and crocodiles. The way the crocodiles and anacondas keep attacking people in this movie, we couldn't help but imagining them grabbing a drink together after a long day's work, even if they occasionally took out one of their own in the chaos. The filmmaker decided to put a group of 20-somethings in the middle of all of this, found themselves stuck between a giant crocodile and a giant anaconda. With Murdoch gone, we now had his sociopathic daughter, Sarah, who went out with Bickerman and Beach in search of the female anaconda to finish her father's work. Honestly, we're cheering for her. Yes, please finish it. We've had enough. This movie was filled with people getting eaten by crocodiles and anacondas, girls running in bikinis, unnecessary sex scenes, and day drinking. The maker basically put everything possible into the movie, except for a story. After a lot of mayhem and, once again, grenades and explosions, brutes of nature were eliminated. However, that's not all. For some weird reason, the crocodiles and anacondas turned against each other and began hunting one another. Sarah got arrested by Bickerman while Beach sacrificed himself. In the end, we saw a baby anaconda hatch from an egg looking like a mix of anaconda and crocodile. Guess we weren't that wrong about the two fraternizing. At this point, Anaconda delivered a C-grade movie. It's considered to be one of the most boring crossovers in cinema and has faced backlash for trying to rip off Jurassic Park/World with genetically mutated snakes and huge crocodiles on the loose. While the popular opinion is to steer away from the film, lovers of cheesy creature features might actually enjoy this one. I'll tell you why. The movie was fast-paced, and 10 minutes into it, you'll experience a good amount of disaster and carnage. It's a storehouse of over-the-top gory scenes, hilarious crocodile attacks, and somewhat entertaining deaths. Moreover, Robert Englund's surprise comeback in this movie worked as a charm for old-time fans. Lake Placid vs. Anaconda wasn't a movie for everyone. However, for those who found comfort in the cliched Sci-Fi Channel originals, the movie was a delightful nonsense. However, it was now categorized as a horror comedy, completely lost touch with the 1997 film. The horror comedy angle caught Sony's attention. This December, they're planning to bring Anaconda back to the big screen. Paul Rudd and Jack Black are set to lead this comical remake of a film that once genuinely sent shivers down our spines. Directed by Tom Gormican, this movie is intended to be a meta reboot where two childhood friends go into the Amazon basin to remake their favorite childhood film, only to encounter a real anaconda. According to Sony Pictures releasing, the movie they're dying to make might just kill them. Considering we have two powerhouse actors and an expected dose of nostalgia, we've got decently high hopes for this one. But then again, it seems unlikely to carry the haunting essence that once made our skin crawl. The question of what actually went wrong with Anaconda, well, it fell into the trap of franchise filmmaking. The studio should have stopped pouring in dollars after the second film because it already showed clear signs of degradation. Yes, we do enjoy brainless, campy movies sometimes, but there was no reason for them to test our tolerance. It's like they were challenging us on how corny a movie could actually get. Anaconda kept on sliding into a dark hole of utter bullshit. Somehow, we kept on finding something good for the sake of fandom, which probably kept this franchise alive. We weren't ready to see the spooky elements turn into humor, but probably that was the last resort to revive a series that was already dead. Marvelous verdict. Alright folks, that's all for today. Anaconda was never exactly an Oscar-worthy movie, but the first one remained true to the idea and was blessed with some impeccable performances. Sadly, the mantle was passed on to several filmmakers who started molding the brand name in their own way and messed up big. I'm not saying they're absolutely unwatchable when you choose not to judge anything and mindlessly see characters being eaten alive by giant snakes. The special effects too begin to dip, and that was a huge blow to the franchise. For a creature movie, you at least need flawless computer graphics, But the latter installments of Anaconda started compromising even there. At some point, you can't help but wonder, why were they even continuing with the films? Was it just fan service or money-mindedness? Regardless, we've ranted about this a lot. Hopefully the new movie will prove to be a turning point in the franchise, and we can finally see what good can come from bringing in comedy, original horror flick. Let us know your thoughts about the Anaconda franchise down below. While you're down there, if you enjoyed this content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Also, there's no shame if you enjoyed these movies. Sometimes all we want is a big bowl of popcorn and pure entertainment, to which Anaconda caters perfectly.